Hello, welcome to a special redo edition of Museum Moments. My name is Ellie Gettinger, and I am the Education Director at Jewish Museum Milwaukee. I am delighted today to be joined by my friend and colleague, Samantha Abramson, who is the Executive Director of the Nathan and Esther Pelz Holocaust Education Resource Center. And as we started talking about this idea, about doing something about the Olympics, it's interesting. We started putting it out into the community, and one of our community members said, my father was at the Nazi Olympics. He was there. He was present. He was a Jewish person in Berlin in the summer of 1936. He grew up there, and he attended the Olympics. And I think for both Samantha and I, it was a little bit like, oh, not only were Jews in Germany at the time, Jews were also in attendance at the Olympics, and it's this weird moment before Kristallnacht, after the Nuremberg laws. So, I mean, Jews have this very marginal existence, and yet they're still engaged in society in certain ways, like going to the Olympics. So I'm excited to be able to present Marvin Tick's father's, Walter's, story a bit. And now I want to jump into the Olympics themselves. He got to see some of these amazing sprints. So let's start by talking about Jesse Owens and Ralph Metcalf, who became kind of the stars of the games and certainly the best known part in terms of thinking about the 1936 Olympics.
Absolutely. So as you said, Ellie, Jesse Owens in particular, it's hard to separate him from the 1936 Olympics because of his record for medals. He became a symbol, in America and to the West as this African-American man who was making a stand against the Aryan implications of propaganda of the Nazis, that having these African-American athletes succeeding the way they did at the Berlin Olympics really sort of threw a wrench in the narrative of Germans as the rightful inheritors of Greek and Roman culture, as the ultimate Aryan race.
Ultimate athletes.
Yeah, exactly. So they were just athletes too. And, in the case of Jesse Owens, he was successful in Germany, and then he came back to the United States and was still subjected to Jim Crow laws here and had discrimination for much of the rest of his life. And he was bullied. He actually ended up having to work in restaurants, at car dealerships, at car repair places, because he just needed to make ends meet. And that was after the Olympics.
I think that's what in this realm of thinking about the kind of profession of the moment of thinking about the Olympics, especially in the 1930s, as being an amateur athletic event, that it meant that if he got paid at all for his sport, which he later got sponsors, that he then lost his amateur standing and could not compete at future Olympics. So, I mean, it's a real, like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. This time we're definitely live. I see that there are people watching us, so thank you, and thank you for your patience if you tried to get in earlier. So some of the other kinds of athletes I think that I'd love to get into is that when the IOC said, yes, we're having the Olympics in Germany, but Germany, you need to be on your best behavior, and you need to make sure that there are athletes of all stripes representing Germany. How did that play out in terms of the Olympics?
So it was overall one big lie. Yes, technically Germany could not ban athletes from competing, but it did. Most Jews and other minorities within Germany were already being excluded from sports clubs by 1933. By 1935, Jews and eventually other groups completely lost their citizenship in Germany. So they could not compete based on the rules. They could not compete as German athletes. So we see this play out in a few different ways. A story I like to think about is that of Gretel Bergman, who was the world-class high jumper of the 1920s and early 30s. And she was a German Jewish woman who had been embraced by her country before the Nazis, and effectively she was banned from participating in the 1936 Olympics. She couldn't compete. She was removed from all of the sports clubs. And then we think of someone else because there was that pressure internationally for Jews and others to have representation. I think the idea that, well, we want to have these Olympics, so we're gonna pretend that we're being very accepting here. There was one token Jew on the German team. So her name was Helene Mayer, and she was to the world of fencing what Michael Jordan was to the world of basketball here in the United States. She was probably the best fencer of the 20th century. And she happened to reside in Germany, and she happened to have a Jewish father. She herself was not a practicing Jew, but she had this in her family. And by normal rules, she wouldn't have been allowed to be competing. In fact, she was already studying abroad in America. And Hitler and the Nazis invited her to participate as the one Jew in the Olympics to appease the international community.
And she's blonde, and she's kind of outside the line. She didn't really claim a Jewish identity herself. Correct. I think that question of being the token Jew and tokenism in general is really challenging. It's challenging for us as 21st century Jews to accept. And I'm certain, what that idea of representation is. And she's kind of a complicated character. I think both of us would love to ask her lots of questions, but that's not really possible.
Correct. And do you have the photo from earlier, Ellie, or should I try sharing?
No, I can't. If you want to share your screen, we can share it, or it's easy and accessible.
Yeah. So what I'm about to share for everybody, if I can find it, here it is.
We'll get it up there.
Yeah. So if everybody takes a minute to look at this image, you'll see this is from the foil. Foil is a type of fencing. It's the foil award ceremony. And who is Helene Mayer? Well, she's the one giving the Hitler salute. And this is incredibly confusing because this is a Jewish woman who has lost citizenship in her own country. Why does she do this? Why does she still give the Heil Hitler salute when she accepts her silver medal? We don't know. She died very early. She died in 1952. So right after the Holocaust, we really didn't have a chance to talk with her about why she did what she did, why she chose to participate.
They're Jewish athletes who come from all over the world to participate in the Olympics. And some of them have been, have this sense of nervousness. Some of them are less engaged with the kind of contemporary events that are going on. Probably the most famous of them are a duo that actually don't compete at all. So tell us that story.
Yeah, and it's related to the Jesse Owens story because we think of Jesse Owens, and it's that fourth medal in the 4x100 relay that really sort of cements him into fame. But he wasn't supposed to run that race. He and his colleague Ralph Metcalf were actually competing in other track events. They had already won medals. They were individualists. They were doing their team thing. And there were two Jewish runners. Their names were Marty Glickman and Sam Stoller, also known as Speedy Stoller. And they were meant to compete in that four-man relay with two other runners. And the day of the Olympics, like just hours before that competition, they were pulled by their coach. They were pulled and replaced by the two African-American men. And this is very controversial. Were they replaced because Hitler didn't want to lose to two Jewish runners? And maybe the Germans had already seen these two African-American men compete and win so many medals that maybe it was like a softened blow in that way. Mm-hmm. Or was it favoritism? There's been a lot of dialogue about whether anti-Semitism was involved in that. But those two athletes were champions in their own right, and they never got to compete, even though they were there.
As we're thinking about this, you worked on an exhibit at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum called State of Deception, which was very much about the propaganda within Germany. Let's talk a little bit about the propaganda function of the Olympics and what was done in order to make it, the sort of thing where Germany comes off looking great. As you were telling me earlier, at the end of the Olympics, Hitler thought that they should host all the Olympics. And potentially they would have been hosting the 1940 Olympics,
Yeah.
So what are the pieces and the machinations that are happening behind the scenes to make this kind of beautiful, glossy picture of German statehood?
Absolutely. So the Nazis were experts at propaganda, and the Olympics were probably their crowning glory. It really, everything that the Olympics represented, the imagery of the ultimate athleticism, those mythical ties back to ancient Greece, it is exactly what the Nazis were going after, because they believed Germany was supposed to inherit all that. So they ran with it. So by this point, it was a dictatorship, obviously, and the Ministry of Propaganda, headed by Joseph Goebbels, was able to control every part of the narrative in the public sphere. So in the weeks prior to the Olympics, Goebbels really censored all media. They weren't allowed to report on anything negative. They really had to tone down the anti-Semitism. You won't see anything negative about Jesse Owens and his wins, because that would have made Germany look racist, and they didn't want to come across that way in the public sphere internationally. So they really toned it down. On the streets of Berlin themselves, just weeks before the Olympics, there were 800 Sinti, who are gypsies. They were cleared out from the streets of Berlin, put into detention centers, completely sort of out of the public view internationally. Something else to keep in mind, in 1936, this is after the passing of the Nuremberg laws. So Jews aren't citizens in the country anymore. They don't have any rights. Those same rules will apply to other minorities later on. And there are already concentration camps under construction in 1936. In fact, only 18 miles away from Berlin, where the Olympics were taking place, in Sachsenhausen, there was a concentration camp being built there that summer. And by the fall of 1936, so just months after the Olympics, there were already prisoners being sent there, mostly political prisoners. Eventually, 200 people will be imprisoned there.
200,000.
200,000, correct.
And in thinking about that kind of the sanitization, all of those things that they're doing, was there any kind of sense from the people who were there that, hey, maybe there's more than meets the eye, or this was such a good cover up at that point that there just is not even?
I think for the most part, people saw what they wanted to see. And I think the propaganda worked very well in that people saw this very positive narrative, and they, for the most part, latched onto it. Now, there are a few exceptions. I can actually quote foreign correspondent William Schreier, who kept a diary during the Olympics, and he says, "I'm afraid the Nazis have succeeded with their propaganda. The Nazis have run the games on a lavish scale never seen before, and this appealed to the athletes. And the Nazis have put up a very good front for the general visitors, especially the big businessmen." So he's recognizing there's something going on, but he's in the minority.
There's a discordant thing that he's picking up on that everybody else is like, no, it's beautiful, it's fine.
Exactly.
Within the kind of realm of the kind of long-term impact, I mean, I think about this moment that the Olympic Games always have this kind of anesthetized view of whatever space we're in. I remember when I was watching the Beijing Games in 2008, and they had done everything they could to make their air clean for that month period, or the Sochi Games when they got rid of all of the stray dogs of Sochi, and you're like, oh, what'd they do? But I mean, literally the Nazis are doing the same sorts of things, except with human lives, and in terms of like really, and I would say both of those regimes are well known for human rights violations. So we're not going to get into that per se, but how much do you think this mars the symbolism of the Olympics, that there is this constant, like, what the PR motives of the games are versus the actual content of the of the host nation?
I mean, there's a lot of nationalism at play, right? It's, the games are political, and they historically have been. And I think, we look at what happened in 1936, just looking at the American team, we look at 312 athletes, 18 of them African-American, 5 of them Jewish, 14 medals from those 18 African Americans alone. And we think about, what did that mean? So these games happen, and then it's sort of a distilled moment in time, and then people go back to their everyday lives. Jesse Owens goes back, and he's experiencing racism again. And
from the president, he never gets,
no, FDR never invites him or any of the African American athletes to the White House, which is, that's notable. And Hitler sees this as a green light. He sees the international community. This was the largest games ever. There were 49 countries who competed. He sees this as a crowning glory for Germany, and he believes that Germany should host all games going forward. And he had asked the famed filmmaker, Lenny
Riefenstahl.
Yeah, thank you. To create the film Olympia, which again became this imagery of Germany equals ancient Greece. Germany equals athleticism, and here we are as Germany hosting this important culture.
So I so appreciate your coming on, not only doing this once, but doing it a second time.
Thank you.
We're even better the second time, everyone. You should know.
The first one was good too, though. Just everybody.
It was. Is there anything else as we're wrapping up that you're like, ooh, we didn't catch this piece?
I think for me, it really, I think about the legacy of this Olympics and sort of what it means going forward. Because, 1940, there is no Olympics. There's no World War II still going on in 44. And the next ones are in 48. And the world has changed a lot by then. So I think about what lessons do we learn from this particular Olympics, which I think it impacts what we do today. Certainly the Olympics we just witnessed there were the torch bearing, there were a lot of carryovers from that. And what other warning signs should we be aware of as an international community when thinking about moments like this?
Thank you so much, Samantha, for joining me. Samantha is the director of the Holocaust Education Resource Center. It is a tremendous source of information, education, insight into the Holocaust, how to teach the Holocaust, how to engage communities in Holocaust study. You can find more information about HERC at their website, HolocaustCenterMilwaukee.org. You can also find more information about Jewish Museum Milwaukee at jewishmuseummilwaukee.org. You can come visit us too. We're open 6 days a week. The one day we're not open, Saturday. Thanks always to our sponsor, Robin Cohen. She is tremendous support and we appreciate it. And thanks, Marvin, for sharing the story of your father and his Olympic experience. We'll see you again next week. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Ellie.